The city didn't sleep, and neither did the hunger in my stomach. My name is Adrian. I spent my mornings washing my face in public fountains and my afternoons trying to convince the world that I still existed. For most people, I was just a blur of rags on the sidewalk, a shadow they stepped over. But I wasn't always a shadow. Close your eyes and imagine a time when my name was etched in silver at the entrance of the country's most prestigious architectural firm. I was the visionary behind the Skyline Gardens, a man whose hands transformed blueprints into monuments. I lived in a penthouse that touched the stars. I shared laughter over expensive dinners and believed my talent made me invincible. I thought I had built a life on solid rock. But betrayal strikes when the sun is brightest. My business partner, a man I called my brother, forged my signature on predatory loans and siphoned every cent from our accounts. Within 48 hours, I was stripped of my firm, my home, and my pride. I watched as my life's work was sold off at an auction while I stood on the curb, holding nothing but a weathered leather portfolio. I lost my wife to the stress and my dignity to the cold concrete. On the top floor of the glass tower that pierced the clouds, Victor lived in a different reality. To him, the world was a chessboard. Victor was the CEO of Vanguard Heights, a man who measured worth by the brand of a watch and the zip code of an office. He had no patience for weakness. Victor didn't just want to be successful, he wanted to be feared. He believed empathy was a defect, a crack in the armor he'd spent years perfecting. He often told his staff that, pity is the currency of losers. The intersection of our lives happened on a Tuesday. I had spent my last few cents to print a single copy of my resume and press my only clean shirt. I stood in the lobby of Vanguard Heights, clutching my portfolio like a shield. I was there for a junior position. I knew I was overqualified, but I needed a door to open, any door. The air conditioning was so cold it felt like a warning, and the marble floors reflected my worn-out shoes like a cruel joke. Next, a voice snapped. I stepped into the elevator, my heart hammering against my ribs. When the doors opened on the executive floor, the silence was deafening. I was led into a massive office where Victor sat behind a desk that looked like it cost more than the apartment I had lost. He didn't look up. He just kept typing with a clinical precision that made my skin crawl. "You have 30 seconds, Victor said, his voice sharp as a razor. "Make them count." I placed my resume on the desk. "My name is Adrian. I have 12 years of experience." Victor finally looked up, but not at my resume. He looked at my frayed cuffs. He looked at the faint stain on my collar from a leaking pipe in the shelter. He leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips that was more insulting than a slap. "Experience? Adrian, let's be honest. You look like you've been living in a dumpster. This is Vanguard Heights. We build the future. We don't recycle the trash of the past. How did you even get past security? Did they think you were here to empty the bins?" The heat of humiliation rose in my neck. I tightened my grip on the portfolio. "I am a qualified architect, sir. I've led projects that define this city's skyline. If you would just look at my portfolio, you would see the structural innovations." Victor didn't look. Instead, he picked up my resume with the tip of his pen, as if touching it would infect him with poverty, and dropped it into the trash can. "I hire winners, Adrian. People who belong in a boardroom, not a breadline. You look like a failure. In my world, failure is contagious. If I hire you, the clients will smell the desperation on you. Get out before I have security arrest you for trespassing. And take your pathetic drawings with you." I stood there, silence ringing in my ears. I wanted to scream that I had built the very ground he was standing on. But I just turned around and walked out. As the elevator doors closed, I heard his booming laughter. Can you believe the nerve? A hobo trying to design a skyscraper. The next few days were the wall. The lowest point of my existence. I sat on a park bench, watching the rain soak through the edges of my portfolio. The cold seeped into my bones, but the chill in my heart was far worse. I was invisible. I watched a young couple walk past me, pulling their child away as if I were a monster in a fairy tale. The isolation was a physical pain, a crushing weight. I felt the high stakes of my survival. If I didn't find a way back, I would simply disappear. I looked at my drawings. The lines were still sharp, but the world only saw the mud on my shoes. Then, I remembered my father's words, "A building is only as strong as its foundation, Adrian. And a man is only as strong as his truth." I realized that while my exterior was weathered, my foundation was still made of reinforced steel. What Victor didn't know was that Vanguard Heights was undergoing a hostile takeover by a silent investment group called the Cornerstone Collective. Victor was desperate. He had a board meeting on Friday to prove his leadership was still viable. He needed a vision for the Oasis Plaza, but he was drowning in arrogance. He couldn't see that the city didn't want more glass, it wanted a soul. Friday morning arrived. Victor stood in the boardroom, sweat glistening on his forehead. The members of the Cornerstone Collective were already seated, their faces obscured by the dim lighting. "The Oasis Plaza will be a monument to luxury," Victor began, his voice forced. "It will be exclusive. A place where only the elite can tread. It will be a tomb," a voice interrupted from the head of the table. Victor froze. "Who said that?" The chair at the head of the table swiveled around. I was sitting there. But I wasn't the man in the frayed shirt. I was wearing a suit that fitted me perfectly, my hair was cut, and my eyes were filled with authority. Victor's jaw dropped. "Adrian," he stammered. "What are you doing here?" "Security. Get this beggar out." "Security won't help you, Victor," I said. "I am the majority shareholder of the Cornerstone Collective. Which means, effectively, I am your boss. And you are sitting in my chair." Victor began to laugh hysterically. "This is a joke. You were begging 3 days ago." "I wasn't begging. I was testing the foundation. I spent 2 years on the street learning what people actually need. When I reclaimed my trust, I didn't buy a mansion. I bought the debt of companies like yours, companies that forgot that people matter more than profits. I'm firing you, Victor. Because you can't build something great on a foundation of arrogance." Victor walked out, his head bowed, his expensive shoes clicking in defeat, the same way I had walked out 3 days before. I placed my weathered portfolio on the table. "Now, let's talk about a design with a soul. True success is how we treat those who can do nothing for us. Humanity is the strongest material we have. You never know whose life you are stepping on while climbing the ladder. In the end, our buildings will crumble, but the kindness we showed will echo forever. I am Adrian. I am home."